I'm going to talk today about putting a training program together for developing hurdlers. And when I was asked to do this, the first thing that springs in mind for me for a developing hurdler is around about the age of 18, something like that, maybe a top year under 20. That's how I perceive a developing hurdler. I'm happy to take questions if you guys work with younger or older athletes, and the sort of things that I might consider doing with younger or older athletes. But for the basis of this, I'm really focusing on kind of around about 18 years of age, something like that. So what am I going to do today? I think it's really important that I want to give you an insight into my world, really. For those of you that don't know me, I'm James Hillier. I'm the UK apprentice coach for sprints and hurdles based down in Bath. I'm a full-time coach. I've been a full-time coach for 3 years, but I've been coaching for 14 on and off. So I've had quite a bit of experience of dealing with mainly youngsters when I first started, and as I've sort of gone on, I've worked with more and more elite. So I want to give you a bit of an insight into my world, really, and the sort of things that I do in my environment and what I do to create a really high-performing environment. I'm going to share with you some of the things that I do to maximise individual success with my athletes within a group situation. I'm going to share some philosophies on coaching hurdles. I have requested a 3'6" hurdle here today because I was a bit embarrassed that Tom was jumping over hurdles. I thought I needed to do something better, but apparently it's not turned up. So I won't be demonstrating any hurdles today down here. I want to talk a bit about James Gladman, who's a lad I took on last year and brought him from just a shade under 14 seconds to running 13:30. And he broke the British record indoors running 7:65. So I want to talk to you a bit about him and what we did with it, or what I did with him. Then I'll give you a kind of overview of my annual plan for sprint hurdles. I've got quite a bit of video that I want to show you as well. I think when I go into a presentation, I want to see video. I want to see what's happening in that person's environment. I think that's really important. So I'm going to try and get through as much video as we can to show you really what happens, and we can talk and discuss that, and really questions as well. So please stop me at any time and ask me questions. We will hopefully have time at the end, but please just stop me. If there's anything that's on your mind, just fire it out there. I really want you to get something out of this presentation. Obviously, it's hard for me to get something that you're all going to get out of just based on the slides. So if there's anything in particular I haven't covered, just get your hand up and ask a question, as long as it's not too difficult. Okay, so where's the starting point? The starting point is, and when I first started my role 3 years ago as a professional coach, I really had to look at what do the best coaches do? How do I become elite? How do I become a world-class coach? What traits do they have? What makes them the best coaches? And I came up with probably three main things that I feel that real top coaches have. Communication is really the most important thing, and that has many guises. It's not just the coach standing and talking to the athlete. It's listening to the athlete. That's communication. It's non-verbal cues. It's body language. It's getting the athlete to understand your perception. There's no point in you telling them something, and if they don't understand it, it's pointless you telling them. So it's making sure they understand your concept. The second one, I think, is discipline. And I think all good coaches, I'm not saying you go in and you shout and scream at your athletes, but you create an environment where there's discipline and there's structure, and the athletes know where the line is and what the boundary is. I think, there's a saying, you give someone an inch, they take a mile. So I think you need to have that structure. And the third thing is recruitment. And I think it's really important that you're, as a coach, you're a good recruiter. Now, that's not necessarily the best athletes. And this year is the first year that I've recruited athletes based on not just their level, but what they can bring to the group and what they can bring to others in the group. So it's not necessarily the best athletes. There might be something in someone that's, you think's not going to be super, super elite, but might bring some value to the group and others in the group. And I'm going to talk a bit about that first off. This is a quote that one of my athletes said, and I just love it. It just sums up what we do. The top coaches know how to squeeze every last drop of water out of a wet towel. So just imagine you've got a wet towel, you squeeze it, and you get all the water out, or you think you do. You have one more go, and you get one more drop out. And that's what we're doing as coaches. We're just trying to get every last bit of talent, every last bit of potential out of our athletes. That really sums up what we do. And that's my motivation anyway, for getting up in the morning and going to work, is to get kids to really achieve their potential. So I'm sure you've seen slides similar to this, but these are the three things that I believe you have to get right to create the right environment. And notice I've called it a learning environment, not a coaching environment. And Tom talked about it yesterday in his presentation, where he said the track is his classroom. And I view it as exactly the same thing. The track is my classroom. So you have to get the environment right, you have to get the athlete right, or the right blend of athletes, and you've got to get the task right. Now, if you get 2 out of the 3, so if you've got the right athlete and the right program for them, but the environment's wrong, you're not going to squeeze every last drop of water out of that towel. So you've got to get those 3 things right. So how do I do that? Well, the first thing is understanding your athletes. This is the absolute most important thing. So I sit down with my athletes. We have one-to-ones at the end of every cycle that we do. I'm constantly talking to them. I'm constantly asking them why or how. Open questions. And I'll just sit there and I'll wait till they tell me what I want to hear. Uncomfortable silences is something you've got to get used to in coaching. Was that uncomfortable then, that silence? Ask them an open question and let them tell you. Don't preempt them. Don't give them the answer in the question. That's what I did when I first started coaching. My questions were about 5 sentences long. Now they're just why, how, really short questions, okay? Also, I do personality modelling with all of my athletes. And that allows me, it gives me a bit of an insight on how best to communicate with them. If I have a very analytical athlete, all they want is facts and figures. So if they come up to me after a session and say, Jane, I'm not feeling good, I'm not feeling it. Okay, well, let's have a look at your times. What did you do this time last year? Well, you're ahead. You're ahead of where you were last year. That's all they need to hear. They don't need an arm around them. They don't need reassurance. That's not how their mind is wired. Other athletes might need that. They might need the arm around them. I had one athlete that literally, if I did not say, how are you today, every time they came to the track, they wouldn't speak to me during the session. Whereas other athletes don't need that. So you've got to understand the personalities and how best to communicate with them. So I don't know if any of you do personality modelling, but look into it. I'm happy to share some of that with you, afterwards or over the course of the day. Encourage open and honest discussion. So once you've understood your athletes, what you build up is trust. And once you've got trust with the individual athletes and within the group, then you can start engaging in open and honest discussion. Because you have to have these difficult conversations with your athletes. And you know what? Athletes know what their strengths are and they know what their weaknesses are, but they just won't admit them. I did a really interesting exercise about 3 weeks ago with my athletes, and I felt they were ready for it. And some of them have been with me 3 years, and it's taken 3 years to get to this level. And I felt the trust was that good within the group. I sat them down, I said, right, we're going to go around the room, and I said, you're going to tell everyone in the group what their worst quality is. And they started shuffling, and the chairs started moving, and they started feeling really awkward. But it's one of the best things we've ever done. And there was no surprises. So the people that were getting critiqued, or the athlete was getting critiqued, they knew, they said, yeah, you know what, that is a fault of mine. Yeah, I know that. But what it does, by engaging in this open, honest discussion, it brings it out. So you're not hiding it, you're not kidding yourselves. Too many athletes kid themselves. You've got to get it out. Talk about it. But that takes time to do that. Your groups might not be ready for that yet. You've got to build up trust before you can do that. Establish a common purpose. Well, this might be a bizarre concept. They're all individuals. They all have their own individual goals. Some of my athletes compete against each other in the summer. So how on earth can I come up with a common purpose? You have to find a common purpose within the group, because otherwise They're not going to work off each other. They're not going to use each other to get better. If you look at the successes of the top athletes at the moment, they've got good groups around them, good people around them. The Jamaican sprinters, you know, success breeds success mentality. So we have two common purposes in my group that we've come up with as a, you know, we've all come up with them together. It's every rep counts. So they've all bought into that concept that every rep counts, and they encourage each other. If they're absolutely wrecked, they've got one more 150 or something to do, they will encourage the other, you know, the guys in the group, and that will come from them, not from me. And it's more powerful coming from your peers than from me. And the second one is that everyone in the group must bring at least one thing every session to help someone else in the group. And that's something that, you know, I've sold to them on the basis that if you improve your training partner, you will get better. So, for example, James, I have 2 sprint hurdlers at the moment. James Gladman and a junior called David King, who's just joined me this year. And James always says he has to be 2 meters ahead of Dave on every run. He has to be. And Dave says, I need to try and be less than 2 meters behind him. So if Dave gets 1.5 meters behind James, then James knows he's got to find another 0.5 meters. So what are we doing? We're getting more water out of the towel. Yeah? We're using the athletes to make each other get better. It's very, very powerful. Make sure they know what excellence looks like for them. So there's no point in expecting excellence if they don't know what it looks like. So I had one guy, one of my sprinters, I won't name him because this is going out, but I have one of my sprinters who I sat down with him, and in fact in this open honest discussion, and almost all of the lads said, look, you're talented, you just kind of turn up 5 minutes late, 2 minutes late, but you're pretty much on time, you do the session and you're the first one out of there. And he said, well, that's all right, I'm doing everything on the programme. And I said, but that's not enough. That's all you're doing. And I was talking them through a session they did. And I remembered everybody in that session apart from this lad. And I said, James, I said, on your runs you were slightly ahead. I said, Dave, you were chasing him. Julian, you were at the back hanging on. I can't remember where you were. And it's like he's come to training, but he's like a ghost. He's just come, done it, not thought about it and gone home. But in his eyes, he thought he was doing everything right. So don't always blame them. Make sure they understand what excellence is. So your perception of excellence is probably different to theirs. So make sure they understand what it looks like. I was doing a session last week with another one of my young sprinters. We were just doing some drills, and Malcolm's group were there lifting. And they all finished and went off, and we were carrying on doing drills. And they all went, apart from Di, who stayed and just did some real monotonous sort of drills. And I turned to him, and I said, that's why he's the world champion. The other guys had gone, but he stayed because he's meticulous, attention to detail, determined to do whatever it takes. Create a culture of shared success. We talked about that. Success breeds success. And create peer accountability. And this is really, really valuable. But again, you can't do this until you've got some of the things at the top there established. So this is, if the kid is late for training, it's not my responsibility to tell him off. It's others in the group's responsibility to tell him off. I had a lad in my group who's seriously talented, but I just could not physically get him to training on time. I would say, right, we're training at 10. And he would literally turn up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Honestly, that's bad. And think he'd done nothing wrong. And I'd shout and scream at him. And the next day he'd be on time. And the day after he'd be late again. Some of you in the room know who we're talking about. And I just couldn't understand how I was going to change this guy's behaviour. What could I do? How could I make him realise how important the group is? But now I've got the other guys giving him grief. So when he's late, they're all texting him, where are you? You're letting us down. You're letting the group down. You need us. We need you. And it's getting better, slowly. So with developing athletes, really, we want to take them on a journey. We want to make them elite. That's our goal, isn't it? We want to make them really elite. So how do we do that? Well, I've kind of identified 5 stages. So discipline and purposeful practice. Well, you need to have the discipline. And purposeful practice, by definition, it's boring, it's monotonous. Invariably, you do it on your own, you do it at home. You know, that's the sort of thing, you know, flexibility stuff and rehab, prehab, conditioning drills that are very unglamorous and stuff. That's the sort of stuff you have to do. Discipline, you know, a lifestyle. You know, you have to live and breathe athletics. You have to be a student of your events. And one of the other speakers mentioned that, might have been Tom or Lauren. And once you've got that, then you can be more accurate in what you do, more accurate in training. And particularly as hurdlers, we have to be accurate and we have to be consistent, because those two things, that's rhythm. And rhythm, as you'll see later in the presentation, but rhythm is integral to hurdling, sprint hurdling and four hurdling. And once you have the accuracy and the consistency of training, you then build up confidence. And a confident athlete is a dangerous athlete. How often do you see an athlete when they're breaking PBs every single week and they're just doing anything, they're just confident? If you could bottle up and sell confidence, to elite athletes, you'd make a fortune, wouldn't you? And once you've got confidence, you've got something called belief. And once you have belief, well, that's really powerful, because that starts affecting others. Any Aston Villa fans here? Are there any? Raise your hand. Okay. So what's going on? They were 2-0 up and they lose 3-2 to Man United. And you know, when that first United goal goes in, you know that Man United's belief is we're going to win, and Aston Villa's belief is, oh crap, they're going to win. Yeah? And what happens? Man United win. And how often do we see it? Because they've got these 4 levels. Look, what sort of discipline has Fergie got? Unbelievable amounts of discipline, hasn't he? How accurate and consistent are those guys? They just churn it every match, every training session. Yeah? How confident are they? And the belief they've got. Yeah? You can see examples of it in elite sport. So these are the 5 stages of mastery when you're executing a task or executing a skill. So first of all, you do it in training. No pressure. Then you add a stress. So you add a competitive stress in training. So make the run competitive. Have someone running against you. Then you execute the task in low-level competition, where there is no expectation. Then you move into a high-level competition. And the final stage of mastery is high-level competition under fatigue. And that is your World Championships, your Olympic Games, where you got rounds. I want to talk a bit about Lawrence Clark, who I'm sure you all know, sprint hurdler, came 4th at Olympic Games. Any of you statos know what his world ranking was this year? 22nd in the world, but he finished 4th at the Olympics. Why did he do that? Because he'd mastered these 5 stages. He was the one that executed accurate and consistent hurdling, which gave him confidence and belief. Lawrence believes he has 10 ways of getting it right, and he believes that others have 10 ways of getting it wrong. How powerful is that when you're on the start line? And you can put it all together with a little equation. Pressure divided by information and understanding, because it's not just the information, is it? It's how you understand that information, times by the application of that information, equals performance. And this is a really nice quote from, I think he's East German, Skollich. He wrote a really good book, Track and Field. And that sums up what you're doing with a developing athlete. It's all about education. It's not just about on the track. It's about mastering all the other skills, the non-technical skills of coaching, if you like. And that kind of sums up very nicely what you're trying to do with developing athletes.